Hello, this is Unexplained America, and I'm your host, Lisa. And thank you so much for your patience. So, it's been a few weeks or more since I put out Heaven's Gate Part 1. I have been on hiatus. I've had my daughter is a senior in high school, and it has been crazy. She just graduated last weekend. We've had a million things going on in the last month. And so I appreciate you guys so much for hanging in there with me. Did not know that I would take this much time, but I do appreciate it. So this is part 2 and the end to Heaven's Gate. Yes. And I do have I'm going to do some catch up work as far as episodes, but tons of fun, quote unquote, episodes coming. So I will be covering Slender Man, which was a request by Heath, an OG listener. I do have some new requests and new information out of Kentucky, so I'm very excited to cover. I'm going to release a Scary Heifer, just kind of movie review. Me and Amber are going to dive into the fun and horror movie, The Omen from the 70s. That will be fun. So a lot of interesting stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Lots of content, lots of catch up coming on. Now, I do have, again, you can follow me on all the social medias, but I'm going to plug the live show. So the live show is happening July 11th. That is a Saturday night. It's 7 p.m. It's going to be so much fun. It is at the historic Ritz Theater in Malvern. So if you're not familiar with Malvern, it is like right outside Hot Springs. It's not very far from where I live in White County, but it is in Arkansas. So get your tickets. You can message me for the link, but this show is going to be me with my friends, Cryptids Across the Atlas. So get your ticket today. We're so excited. It's a big theater, plenty of seats, but yeah, get your tickets today. Listener discretion, because again, you guys know this does have to do with mass suicide, specifically in this episode, and mental illness discussion. So please, just listener discretion. And, if this is something that you can't handle, please turn off and go to another episode of mine. But this has been really interesting, and I will say a lot more information than I even thought. So, part 1 ended with us discussing Bonnie, who was also called Peep, who was also called T. Like, she passed away, and she passed away in 1985. The group finally told her daughter in 1986, and that's kind of where we left off. So, Bonnie's daughter, Terry, had been reaching out to the group, just kind of trying to get a hold of Bonnie. And so, Bonnie's mom had passed away. But anyway, Herff is running things from 1986 onwards all by himself. And he had already, Bonnie had been sick. So he had already prepared the group for her death. So kind of their whole message and prophecy had to shift, because the whole time they're teaching about it being the two of them. And I even have something that I will share with you guys. So that they had uttered back in, the 70s that discusses this. But it was always about the two of them. It was always said that they were going to be martyred. They were going to be killed. They were going to rise after 3.5 days. So they were very much aligning themselves like they were Jesus. But it was always the two of them. So Herff really had to just start spinning a different direction. And basically he tells his followers, his members, that, that things have shifted, things have changed. Basically, Bonnie, who they knew as T, was too enlightened to be held in human vessel. And they called it like a vehicle, like her body was just too enlightened. And so she actually went on to the next level. And so he was kind of talking to the group like, Bonnie's still here. Bonnie still talks to me. He calls her T, but like, she is still with me. She is a higher being, and we're all going to go meet her. So he just shifts the direction for the members, and really everybody just kind of, he doesn't lose any membership. They just kind of go along with that. Okay. I will go back a little bit and discuss the naming, quote unquote, of members of the group. So Bonnie and Herff were going by nicknames themselves. Okay, so they were like Bo and Peep, the Two, T and Doe. Like there were a million different nicknames. There's going to be more that we discuss, but they were always using nicknames. And then once people, like members, came into their group, they required that they kind of cast away not only their families and possessions, but they kind of wanted them to be renamed. And it's really unclear exactly at what point this happens, because there's different remembrances, there's different things that past members have talked about, and clearly they weren't going by these names. But there was the big recruitment time frame of 1975 to 1976, and then they closed recruitment and they went underground because they were getting a lot of backlash. Now, we talked about that in part 1. Now, also the use of nicknames and aliases were also utilized because these people were kind of living off the grid. They were hiding from the government. They weren't living life like the rest of us. They weren't filing tax returns or anything like that. And in fact, when Bonnie died, Herff put her in hospital like under a different name, like a Shelly or Sherry, I believe. So they were just hiding their identity. So that wasn't anything new for anyone in the group to kind of go by a different name. Now, it's said that Bonnie and Herff came up with kind of a ritual to rename the members, and they utilized a 3-letter single-syllable type name, like quote-unquote first name, and then they added the letters ODY to the end. So, for example, one of the OG longtime members, her name was Erica Ernest. Now, she was called Chakotay. That's Chkody. And she had joined in 1975. And in some of cases, the letters were kind of like shortened letters of like a birth name. Obviously not in Erica's case, because you would think Erica would be Irk Odie or something in my mind. Like I would be Lise Odie. I've joked to my husband, Daryl, he would be Dare Odie. But now the Odie part was meant to mean like a child of God. Like they took G-O-D, but then they dropped the G, and then they added a Y as in like you're in training, or kind of like you're a junior. Like if you're a kid, your name would be like Jim, but then your family might call you Jimmy. So this was kind of the idea, or what was said, to come up with this ODY. Now they said once you were done with your quote unquote training and you made it to the quote unquote next level, which was the kingdom of God, that you would then just be like OD on your name. You would drop the Y because you would be closer to God. So, and again, they kind of talked about this like there's James, you go by Jim, and then you're a kid, so you have Jimmy. It's just, that was kind of the idea for these names. Now, towards the end of the group, like in the 90s, these names were kind of utilized more, but I would say like more on the back end than the front end, because clearly like through all of the documentation that people actually see, there were nicknames given for sure. Like we talked about how when Terry found out that Bonnie died, and this is Bonnie's daughter, like 2 members came to her house and they called themselves like Dan and Sonny or something like, it was just like they were clearly maybe not their given names, but they were not using these ODY names religiously, quote unquote. They weren't using them in public for sure. And then again, they were all going by different aliases when they're running around the country, kind of escaping, because they're trying to lay low. They're trying to escape family members that are looking for them, like all of these things. But this is kind of said that this happened maybe later 70s and 80s. It was said to come about during the time that Bonnie was alive, but again, not really utilized much until like later on. Now, again, the group is living under Herff. They're living communally. They share funds. They kind of are getting work wherever they can. Now, they did have a member, and we'll talk about his name was David, and he'll be brought up, but he had joined the group. His name is David Van Sinderen. He had joined in 75, and his group name is Elodie. Now, his father was extremely wealthy. He was the CEO of one of the oldest telephone companies in kind of the eastern part of the country. And David had a trust fund, and he pretty much just, again, they're sharing funds. He pretty much gives full money, full control of his trust fund, like monies to the group. So they pretty much were living on David's trust fund and of course other people's inherited funds and such, whatever people brought to the table, but pretty much all the end of the 70s. Now, by the end or early 80s, they were having to work jobs. And Herff was even discussing later on that if they had to dig a ditch or do whatever they had to do to get money, and again, they're kind of living in campsites. They're not living large as what we'll see towards the end, but they're kind of doing whatever work they can to get by, okay? And they're pooling their money and they're living, in a camping situation, but pretty much living very simple lives, because again, the whole premise of this thing is, we're overcoming our humanness. We're leaving our possessions. We're too good for that. We're trying to get to this next level. And so we don't, care about possessions. We don't care about, sex and drugs and alcohol, like any of these things, even food. We can't be ruled by these things. So again, they're just living to survive. Now, Herff is preaching to the group again that he was left behind by Bonnie, but he still had so much more to learn, and that Bonnie was definitely his elder member, his more senior teacher, like she had kind of been in charge, and he would even refer to her as the father and just kind of basically, again, talk about her being gone, but yet she was beside him. She was talking to him. She was leading him. He was still taking and learning from her. So now on the flip side of that, of course, he's intensely talking to these members that the only way to the next level or the next kingdom was to listen to him, follow what he said, and do as he said. Like that was the only way that was going to get them to the next level. Now, the group, again, we know that they had their rules. No sex was kind of the biggest deal to them. And this was like any type of sexual activity, like self gratification, anything of that nature. So there was no drugs, no drinking. Now, the biggest guidance given by Bonnie and Herff in those later 70s to 80s was to spend as much time in meditation and in prayer. And then in 1982, there's literally a recording of Bonnie stating, "We want you to devote as much of your time in sitting in meditation." And she advised to kind of not rush this. So she said that you need to rush through your so-called, she called it like lab work. These were like the jobs outside of the group, or maybe the people that worked within the home for the group, for the betterment of the group. But rush through those activities, but then to really spend most of your time, the most of your day in meditation and in the teachings. And she really urged them to establish a strong direct line of communication. And this was Herff really driving this home as well, when it was just him. Like, I am your father. You just need to basically not make up your own mind, not do your own will, but have a strong direct line of communication directly with me. Like, you're supposed to have zero individual thoughts, but to run everything by me. This is Herff talking to the group. Now, Over the years, on top of the meditation, the group, they kind of did different things of just discipline. So it was all kinds of different diets going on. Like they were trying to be super disciplined in their diet because, again, okay, gluttony or eating too much or just wasn't good for you. It wasn't about the food. It was just to kind of, okay, we have to take care of this vehicle that our body is, but we're not to enjoy anything. So, not enjoying food or whatever. But they would participate in kind of different diets to kind of see what could get them by. So, they tried to be vegetarians at times, they tried to be fruitarians at times. They were practicing the Hippocrates diet, which was basically eating like all raw foods, veggies, fruits, grains, nuts, like absolutely nothing cooked or processed. And they were really, again, trying to break down the enjoyment of the food intake. So, not being human, quote unquote, and enjoying the eating. Now, ex members would say, okay, sometimes we passed out. Like when one of the members was just eating the fruit diet, like it just wasn't working. I mean, they would be working all day, just eating fruit, and they would pass out. So these things weren't like set in stone. It was pretty much like, okay, this didn't work. They would give them a piece of bread. It wasn't like a punishment type of situation. And it wasn't very, I would say, hard and fast. Like it wasn't, everything was very fluid. And in fact, we talked about kind of in part one where like Herff and Bonnie pretty much kind of told the people, okay, you've got to be very flexible. It's like, just listen to us, but everything's going to be super regimental, but yet not really, because you just have to be flexible. So it's like they're setting these things up, but then, okay, this didn't work. This person passed out. Give them some meat, bread, whatever. Like this didn't work for this person. So people were they were still living their lives. They were trying to follow whatever was determined for the group, but it wasn't set in stone. And again, it's very flexible because on the flip side, they were eating all kinds of things. And as we get in this, you're going to see just it's very hypocritical as far as these rules and guidelines go. Now, another practice assigned to the members, and this was assigned pretty early, they were called check partners. Now, obviously, Bonnie and Herff were each other's check partners. Like they had a membership, but basically when people would come into the group, they felt like they needed a check partner as well. And they would team people up with someone that was like your complete opposite, like to the point of pushing you to like being annoyed with this person, like someone that would absolutely not be who you would pick to hang out with, someone just completely annoying. And this was, in their opinion, to really, I think a check partner is kind of like accountability type thing, and you're not doing anything on your own. But they said it was because they wanted to overcome your humanness. And this was kind of a way to kind of push that out. And in fact, they would even at first match up like men and women as check partners. And of course, they're really against any type of, sex, any type of attraction going on. So yeah, that was kind of weird at first, and they kind of had to deal with that. But they would match up people that were attracted to each other at first. They would, match up people that irritated each other. So the partners were to literally do all things together. Like nothing would be done apart. No aloneness, no individualism. Now, more in the 90s, Herff would, he kind of, again, changed. He would not put anyone together that could possibly be attracted to each other. But in the late 70s, it was kind of like male, female, or whatever sex you were attracted to. They would kind of put you with these people. Now, one former member, her name was Leslie, she joined in the 70s. She was kind of a hippie. Now, they teamed her up with someone that was just completely not like her, just very, and almost to the point where it scared her. It was like a man who made her very uncomfortable. And so she went to them and had them place her with like a different person. And they did. They listened to her, they changed it, but she eventually left the group anyway. She was not into being controlled. She wasn't into following, this practice of zero individualism. So she left anyway. Now, in some cases, the partnerships did exactly as was designed. Like one former member recalled being partners with a member named Glenody, and that's going to come up. But this person, this is Lawrence Gale. So, and he would remain in the group, but this person was teamed up with Lawrence, and she was she worked really fast. Okay. So she was a fast worker. She did everything fast when she was doing like laundry and everything. And this Lawrence, he worked really slowly. Like he didn't rush. He took his time. And at first, this, like, she recalls this, it enraged her. Like she was like, oh my goodness, like what is taking you so long? But she did learn to slow her roll and kind of maybe meet his energy instead of letting it enrage her. And it ended up bringing her like a lot more compassion, empathy, patience with people. Like all of these, it brought out good qualities in her. And we're going to talk about, there were a lot of really good qualities in these people. Okay. It's just so interesting. So before Bonnie died, she does write up a collection of prayers, and these prayers are utilized by the group after her passing and beyond. So I'm going to give you an example of this. So she called this a focusing, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to kind of give you a little idea, but of what they were praying to and when they were meditating and such, the kind of verbiage they use. But I would like to know more than I now know. I would like to have more control over my vehicle, its chemistry, its thoughts, its responses, its desires than I now have. I would like to rise above the things that distract me and bind me to this world. And then she ends, I am going to hold on to this until I sit and become even more. Now, just to kind of give you guys an idea. So now in 1987, a document is released from the group members. And they're releasing this document, just kind of sending it all over the country. This is 87. They're not utilizing like computers at this point or whatever. But so they're kind of mailing these documents to different places, and you'll kind of see what they're doing. So the document's released. It is labeled Anonymous Sexaholics Celibate Church State of Beliefs. And it says that it's written by the class. The class. Now the documents outline beliefs and begins with, we believe in one true God who created all things. And it goes on to state they believe in Lucifer, Satan. They discuss Satan tricking Eve in the Garden of Eden. They discuss that God sent special instructions to Abraham, Moses, Enoch, and Elijah. It talks about God sending Jesus and Jesus saying believers, or you must believe in order to follow it. It says it talks about Jesus saving believers. And then it turns and talks about those who were filled with redemptive love are taking bodies, vehicles, and are subconsciously awakening to knowledge that the time to prepare to physically enter the kingdom of heaven is now upon us. So they're stating in this document that Lucifer, Satan, is targeting sexaholics, sex and love addicts, and then AIDS victims, and that he's using sex to keep these people away from God. Now, they end this document with, entry into his kingdom requires that we have a vehicle sufficiently under control as judged by our Heavenly Father to take us so that we change into a perfect one. Now, to give you guys an idea, so they labeled this as Anonymous Sexaholic Celibate Church. Now, there is a Sexaholics Anonymous group, which was founded in 1979. So again, they were kind of not tricking people, but they're using a different name, but a very similar name to the Sexaholics Anonymous. And these were not even closely aligned. And they were kind of hiding under this, the celibate church state of beliefs. Okay. Now in this document, they are discussing church, God, prayer. You really wouldn't see how their beliefs are any different than Christian beliefs. I mean, you really wouldn't, other than just their own verbiage thrown in there. They're about vehicles. I mean, you really wouldn't know. It doesn't say you're worshiping, Marshall Herff Applewhite. It doesn't say that. So it's extremely interesting. I will say the document cites different Bible verses, Matthew 22:37, Corinthians verses in chapter 7. Like there are several references to the Bible. It's talking about the Bible. Like this is very interesting. And again, you wouldn't even see anything different about this, but it does discuss check partners. It does discuss the body as a vehicle, but it doesn't mention anything about like aliens, UFOs, Herff, tea and dough, like absolutely nothing. So it's just very interesting. At the very end of this publication, they write, "We are not trying to convince anyone of our beliefs and ways or to recruit converts. We are seeking to be led to those who already recognize they are of the same mind and need our assistance in awakening their potential. Recognizing that what has worked for us can work for them, it is our policy to neither debate nor to defend our beliefs, for in doing so, we open doors for influences to weaken our position and dilute the knowledge that we have been given." So they do end with that. And to me, I mean, just looking at that, it's kind of, okay, you're alluding to a different thought, but everything that you have written has really just been like biblical Christianity. So again, it's just very interesting. During this time, it is said that Herff is very paranoid. So even though they are putting out literature, like they're not doing their meetings like they were in the 70s, they had kind of gone underground, but he is very paranoid. He didn't want anyone infiltrating the group. He was very worried that the government was watching the group and after them. And he would state this, that he was very worried about the government and that they were going to come after them. So this is what he's saying. And it's just very interesting. Now, these documents, they are mailed out to groups already associated with sexaholics type organizations. And based on the knowledge of the final 38 members, no one kind of enters the group in this time frame. Okay, so there's not any entry into the group in the 80s. Everyone was kind of either from the 70s or had entered in like 91, and we'll talk about that. But this was kind of a period that I would say a transition for the group. Like they would be losing members at different variations, but really not gaining members. And they were pretty much staying solid at about, let's just say like around the 40 to 50 members group. And not all of these members, we're kind of going to talk about, but they weren't all living, quote unquote, in the same area at the same time. So sometimes they were floating around the country. They were kind of like breaking down into different groups. Like one group might be in Colorado, one might be in California, and we'll kind of get more detailed in that. In the spring of 1988, there is a booklet that they put together and they send out via mailers to various New Age centers across the country. So they're just doing mailers, and they title this pamphlet Major Offenses. And then they have kind of a list, and then they talk about lesser offenses. So basically they're putting out this document. So a major offense that they list is deceit, doing an act on the quote unquote sly, lying to my teachers or any of my classmates, keeping an offense to myself, not exposing it in the same day. Number 2 of major offenses is sensuality, permitting arousal in thought or in action. And in parentheses, it says not nipping it in the bud. Number 3 of the major offenses is breaking any instruction or procedure knowingly. So then there's only these 3 major offenses. So these would be like, if you do these things, they're going to, I guess, kick you out of the group or ask you to leave. Now, a lesser offense is taking any action without using my check partner, trusting my own judgment or using my own mind, twisting procedures for my own benefit, responding defensively to my classmates or teachers, criticizing or finding fault with classmates or teachers, allowing blatant or lingering negativity, accepting the position of I can't, permitting physical or verbal abuse. That's like swearing, anger, just anything towards a classmate, harsh words, sarcasm, just anything kind of mean. Allowing jealousy towards a classmate or comparing myself to others, staying in my head, having private thoughts, not staying open with my partner, putting myself first, wanting my own way, being rebellious or selfish, entertaining inappropriate fears and worries. An example, am I going to be asked to leave the class? Will our rest or consuming be adequate for my needs? So basically being worried. Inappropriately offering suggestions, second guessing or jumping ahead. Exaggerating vehicular symptoms. So basically, I guess if you're saying, oh, I heard or whatever. Allowing anxiety, stress, tension, hyperness, or anything to affect my performance. Picking or choosing certain tasks, having likes or dislikes. Permitting laziness or slothfulness. Procrastinating, having misplaced priorities or poor timing. Permitting lack of control over emotions. Participating in extreme sensitivity. Desiring attention or approval. Using inadequate restraint like volume, noise levels, just, I guess, being loud or too quick. Engaging in familiarity, casualness, or gossip, lack of restraint with others. Being too aggressive or pushy. Exercising poor control of thoughts, lacking in effort and commitment. Permitting impatience or intolerance. Being vain about appearance, vibrating either femininity or masculinity in any way, having inappropriate curiosity, I guess asking questions or debating, and then identifying with influences using the words I or me, over-examination, finding a negative where there isn't one. So these were the lesser offense, but basically they put out this document about all the things that they didn't want in their memberships. Now, in October, so this was kind of the spring, in October, they put out more documents. Now, this document was specifically about the UFO-2 and their crew. So, basically, in 1988, they kind of write up the history, quote unquote, of how the group began. And basically, this is Herff coming up with this narrative about how, how they started. So it literally says that Bonnie was a happily married person when Herff met her. It said that Herff was, which she was not. It said Herff was a divorced man living with a man. It said that they hated people that would say about themselves that they were reincarnated from someone famous like Cleopatra or biblical king, yet they came forward and said that they were reincarnated as Jesus or God. So, yes. So this document was really lengthy document. It went on, I will say, it went on and on about their background and about different ideas for the group. And again, everything that Herff does is lengthy. It's like one reporter had said he's like a mishmash soup. And it's just, it goes on and on and on as far as what he's saying. Now, one thing this document kind of ends with, it talks about ufologists said that we must not know anything about the world of spacecrafts because we had used the term UFO, and what they knew of what we stood for seemed too spiritual. So he's saying this, that ufologists don't agree with what they talk about. He said, we believe in the reality of God, his kingdom, and of his son, Jesus Christ. If we are off track in any way, we want it rectified. If we are some well-meaning, misguided, charismatic cult that is full of baloney, we want that rectified. However, if we are in fact in his service, we want that service brought to its full fruition according to God's will. We want only what's right in his eyes. Again, and this is them talking, what are we to do with what we know? Again, it really outlines their, I will say, not their, but Herff's innate Christianity. Because, of course, we know what he grew up in. We looked at that in part 1. We know about his background, his ministry work. I mean, he is very much a Christian man. And even in his teachings with the group, everything that they're putting out there, like, it very much aligns with them being Christian. Like, there's very little that they put out, at least to the masses, that dictates anything otherwise. Does that make sense? Like, it's very interesting. To me, it's almost hiding behind the Bible, I feel like. And that's just my perception. But anyway, it's just very interesting. So they put out this document in 88. So they're writing, they're documenting, they're not really taking on any people, but they're sending out these publications all over the country. Now, work-wise, and we're going to kind of get into this, they begin working with computers in the 1980s, like as far as the bulk of the people within the group, their actual work that they're good at and such. Now, a little background on computers, just to kind of give you guys some idea. The first commercial computers were developed in the 50s. We're talking the 50s. They were probably as big as a house, okay? They were huge. They were cumbersome, but there were computers, quote unquote, in the 50s. Now, home computers were happening as early as the 70s. And the actual Apple computer, like personal computer, came out in 77. But now most businesses by the 1980s were utilizing computers for businesses. So maybe people didn't have them in their homes necessarily, but they had them in their businesses. They were using them. Okay, did you ever see Sleepless in Seattle, and the kids are trying to book, his little flight to New York to meet Annie, and they get on a computer. Like, it's all very primitive looking, looks very, the screen and the green type, but like work wise, everybody was using a computer for work. Now, one of the members, her name was Margaret Richter, and she'll come up later. Her name within the group was Melody. She was literally a computer programmer. And there were several in the group that either went to school for this. These people were highly educated, intelligent individuals, or able to learn things. And of course, they're all very structured and such, but these are really smart people. So she is a computer programmer. And there are other people in the group that were into computers. And so they're teaching the others in the group. So they are working in computers. They are learning all about computers. And again, this will be very apparent, especially in the 90s, but they are working in computers, and instead of ditch digging, quote unquote, they're working with companies and working on their computers. Okay. Now in 1992, kind of between June and then all the way into December. So they kind of start, and it says that they maybe start planning this in 91, but they actually begin work, quote unquote, on this in 92. But Herff has videos that he's done. So he wanted to do recruitment videos and called them teaching sessions, okay, that they recorded and then they released on satellite TV. So back in the day, you could like pay some money and release your program on satellite TV. Like anyone could have a show. Remember, kind of think about it like the old SNL skit. You have Saturday Night Live, you have Wayne's World. Like it was like a show on satellite. So if you had a satellite, you could pick up this kind of primitive recording. So they recorded these videos. There were 12 total videos kind of between June of 92 and then December of 92. And these shows were about an hour long. The final 12th session was like 2 hours, and they were called Beyond Human. And essentially, it was Herff talking with like two of the students, like in the first video. And in fact, in video number 1, it was 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 12. So the bulk of the videos was like Herff talking to one of the members. He called her June, by the way, which is her middle name, but her name is Denise June Thornton, and we'll kind of talk about her later. But her Odie name was Gwynodie, and then Sawyer, who was Swadodie. Now, Sawyer left the group. Sawyer, I'm going to spend kind of a side note on. He is still around. He had left the group in 94, but he had entered the group like in 75 or 76. Like he was an OG member. He is with June, and they went by June and Sawyer in the videos, and they were pretty like up there as far as members, okay? And Sawyer is still around. He has a YouTube channel. You can watch his information. Of course, he was in the documentary, so you kind of hear from him. And he talks about leaving in 1994, kind of after they discussed exiting, but he says he didn't care so much about the exiting. That didn't bother him. He was pretty indoctrined into this and still seems to believe in the teachings of like Herff. But he left just because he had extreme desire and arousal. Like he couldn't overcome it, didn't want to overcome his like physical maleness, quote unquote. So we'll talk about that. But literally it's like June and Sawyer in the bulk of these videos. And, the students are supposed to be listening to Herff talk and then asking questions to kind of the point of it was to just kind of give people an idea of what their beliefs were. Well, I will tell you, I watched the bulk of these 12 videos. It is horrendously hard to watch. In Herff, he again, it's mishmash soup. He goes on and on and on and on. Like he hardly even gets to their questions. And in fact, he kind of laughs about it and he kind of realizes it. But I will say in session 2, what was very interesting to me, so Herff is discussing Jesus and he literally gets choked up, like talking about Jesus and like a true believer, like you're sitting in church and I have faith myself. It would be like he is obviously choked up about Christ and about what Christ did for us in our sins. And he's even talking about when he's getting choked up, he's talking about like, I don't want to offend people that believe in Christ. Like, it's almost like the idea of people coming to him is offensive, of course, because the only way to, heaven is through Christ and belief. Well, it's like he is getting choked up at the thought of that. And so I thought that is another example of Herff's innate Christianity. Like it's really interesting. But he is discussing again how he doesn't want to trample or degrade people's belief. And again, he's getting choked up. So the ramblings really are very much like before. As you can see, they're very in line with Christianity. They discuss the Bible. In fact, in session 9, he is discussing Psalms. Now, again, he does touch on check partners. They talk about check partners. But it's not like he's like, hey, we're going to get on a UFO and go to the next level and you have to only follow me. Like, it's not. So And there's still, again, this situation is still not called Heaven's Gate. They really are going by Total Overcomers Anonymous, like it's that kind of thing. So really interesting. But they are issuing out these teachings via the satellite, and this is 91 and 92. So kind of they're reaching out. They did their publications, which they mailed, and now they're doing the satellite videos, and then they do tape these so that they can mail them out to other people as well. So, and I will say, in his teachings, quote unquote, there really is very little anything new. Like, again, what he's primarily like driving home is maybe things that Bonnie discussed, and then like biblical stuff. So there's no original ideas. There's not anything. And at this point, this doesn't really produce many. There are a few new members, which we'll talk about, coming about, but not in the 1991. Edit that. Not in 1992. Now, in 1993, part of the group is living in California. They're living in a small community called Del Rios, and some of them are renting a home there. Some are renting a home in Rancho Bernardo. And these communities, just to kind of give you an idea, they are very close. And this is kind of the community that they will be in till the end, but these communities are very close. They're a little bit north of San Diego, and they're also very close to like the Mexico border and the town that I'm sure you've heard of, Tijuana. So all of this will come up, but this is just a very beautiful section of Southern California where they're living and working. And of course, there's a lot of computer programming, and they're working in computers and such. This will come about. But yes. Now, in 1993, on top of the satellite series, the group pays for a third-page ad in the USA Today, okay? And this ad runs May 27th of 1993. This is just making a statement of their beliefs and just kind of giving people, it's just putting out an ad there. It was issued in the USA Today national paper and international paper, okay? And the title of this article is Last Chance to Advance Beyond Human. And just a little bit of this, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it starts out with Earth's present civilization is about to be recycled, spaded under, in order that the planet might be refurbished. The human weeds have taken over the garden and disturbed its usefulness beyond repair. The human kingdom was designed as a stepping stone between the animal kingdom and the evolutionary kingdom level above human. In parentheses, it says the true kingdom of God. It is the soul that can progress from the human kingdom to the kingdom level above human. Both kingdom levels have their own unique physical containers, quote unquote, bodies for the souls that reside in the kingdom. And it goes on and on and on and on. And it ends with talking about the soul survives and moves forward through all its tests along the way. It can, with the help of a member of the level above human, lose its temporal characteristics and become a part of their non-perishable, non-corruptible world. However, all other souls who reach a certain degree of corruption, having of their own free will, choose to become totally separate from their creator, whether knowingly or not, will engage a self-destruct mechanism at the age's end. So this statement issued out in the newspapers, again, it's circulated in the USA Today, but also in some alternative non-mainstream papers. So it's kind of some alternative papers like New Age and such, UFO papers. Now, at the time between 93 and 94, they're also holding meetings. So again, they hadn't held meetings much across the country. They had done maybe some radio shows from some like the type of kind of alternate thinking or kind of non-mainstream situations, like people that believe in UFOs. people that believe in just anything alternative. So they start to hold meetings, and they hold some meetings actually even in the University of Illinois. They're kind of traveling around, holding the meetings, and they're actually like kind of doing a kind of new harvest or a second harvest. Now, in January of 1994, the group is passing out flyers in Santa Monica, and they are warning about the earth being refurbished, which is part of their deal, And this happens 3 days right before the what was called the Northridge earthquake. Now, this earthquake was huge in 94. It was a 6.7 on the seismic scale. It killed between 50 and 70 people. It injured 9,000. So when this happened, it really kind of energized the group because, of course, they're telling people that the earth is going to be refurbished. And then this happens, like right at the time that they're kind of preaching this, okay? Now, they go, again, they're holding more meetings, all in 1994. They do have a meeting that draws about 30 people. They have this at a library in Madison, Wisconsin, but 0 people actually like join kind of during this time frame at all. There may be 6 or so members that join from these type of meetings, but some of them were even who had been a member like in the past. And at this time, when they're traveling around, they are called the Total Overcomers Anonymous still. And they're really focusing on people with like addictions and kind of honing in on people in need. And that does seem to be the typical reason for people joining them is they are in need, they're in trouble, they're having difficulties in their life. Now, at a different meeting in Alabama in 1994, there is a student, one of their members, and she is being called Millie. Like, she goes to the meeting and she calls herself Millie to this group, and she tells the group, because there's pretty much the primary people that are showing up for these meetings are reporters, and then there are some watch groups. So there's some actual watch group. There's one called the Watchman Fellowship, and they are monitoring cult activities. So a lot of people were showing up for that purpose or to report on it, but she's the one that states and coins this phrase. She states, "We are the cult of cults." Yes, and this was Millie. Now, a student named Raymond Bowers, he re-enters the group during this time, and his student name is Todoti. And he actually had joined the group in the 70s. He had left, came back, and he described the reason why he had left or whatever, or had re-entered, was he had become very successful in the world, but he had been beaten, lied to, cheated on, robbed, threatened, abused. Just all these horrible things happened to him when he was in the world, and those things never happened when he was in the group. So he decided to rejoin, and he would remain with the group to the very end. Now, in all, again, about 7 members join in this time frame, and they will be in the final recruitment. And like we talked about, Raymond, strike all that. Just end with recruitment. In all, there would be about 7 members that join during this time that remain with the group. Now, we had talked about the David Cabot Van Sinderen. So he was very wealthy. He still had, clout, business clout, connections. So he would handle a lot of business for the group. Now, in June of 1995, he purchases a large acreage of land in New Mexico, which is on the eastern boundary of the Cibola National Forest there. Now, the group, in 95. They basically take this land and they have some people already living and working in New Mexico. Again, everybody's kind of like not necessarily in the same place. There are about 5 of them in New Mexico, kind of working and settled. And they're working on this land and they literally build kind of like a fortress, a makeshift fortress on this compound. And it looks very much like they are building up a compound and they're calling it the Earth Ship. Okay. So this is 95, guys. So there is something Sawyer will discuss that Herff was discussing about exiting the Earth. And of course, they are talking about the Earth being refurbished in 94, but they are very much purchasing things, buying things, kind of settling into this property in New Mexico in 95. Now, on July 23rd of 1995, a PhD in astrology professor named Alan Hale, he is observing a cluster in the Sagittarius section of the universe, the sky. Like, I don't even know what he's looking at, but he's an astrology person. He is looking. Now, he notices something really fuzzy when he's looking at this known star system. And then he notices something new. And he is located in Cloudcroft, New Mexico. Now, OG listeners, longtime listeners, do you know why this sounds familiar? Remember the Christmas Killer? Ronald Gene Simmons was located in Cloudcroft. Now, this is a very I think it's a very good area for seeing astrology, seeing the sky. This is also like you have like Air Force bases and such, and that's why the Ronald Gene Simmons was out there. But anyway, so at the same time as Alan Hale is observing, at the exact same time, a man named Thomas Bopp is in Arizona, and he's noticing the same thing. And it turns out under like more inspection that this fuzzy thing in the sky that they're looking at is a comet. It was just so far away. So, little side note, when Halley's Comet was discovered in 1910, people were really frightened about this. And in fact, astronomers were kind of telling people that they were detecting traces of poisonous cyanide like around this comet. And so people became really alarmed. And as this comet was approaching the Earth, there were about like 8 or so individuals that actually jumped off of bridges or buildings. Like they were scared of this comet. This kind of thing kind of turned some people kind of into a doomsday situation, like the Earth is going to end because of this comet situation. So the same thing is happening with this Hale. They end up calling it the Hale-Bopp comet. And again, it's discovered in July of 1995. But this kind of thing gets on everybody's radar, especially these alternative people or conspiracy theorists. And they are kind of turning this into a doomsday situation. Okay. Now, after this comet is released, there is something written by that Denise Thurman. Okay, remember Denise, June, I talked about her, Gwinnoti. So in September of 1995, it said that she, along with Herff, write something called the Undercover Jesus. And basically she's writing again and outlining their thoughts and everything about their belief system. And they're putting this out there. And this will actually go on their website. So their website at the same time, she writes Undercover Jesus, which will be on their website coming soon. Okay. So just this website is coming. The website that we would know of today. Now, the group's main source of income is under a business that they form, and it is called Higher Source. Now, this is a company that creates and works on building websites for other companies. And this is really in a very infancy of businesses really utilizing websites for their business. Okay, this is all like brand new. The internet, like all of this is just kind of like 94, 95. Like this is a newer thing. This is just, and this is big money, and it still is big money to get websites created, but this is a big to-do. Now, the company is actually filed under a person named Ben. The address used for this person is a Ramada Inn out of Denver, Colorado. And there are about 4 or 5 members in the group that are working for a different company directly called Websites Now. Now, one of these members would actually end up leaving the group, and kind of notate this. Like, his name is Richard Ford, but he goes by Rio D'Angelo. Okay, now we're going to get more into Rio as we move forward, but he is working for this other company, and there are others in the group that are working. It's kind of like a contract thing. Like, some members are working under Higher Source, then some of these people are working directly with these other companies. So there's just a whole lot going on, but this is their main source of income, and they're making quite a lot of money. Now, another company called CompX, which was run by a man named Mike, they had a few, and they'll kind of notate that they have a few people working under them that were part of this cult. They call it a religious, group. They went by Jeff, Nora, and Goldie. And they were working directly under him. They were working on the computers. And then there were also a group that were working under a company called General Insurance Agency. And all of these people are making anywhere from like $35 an hour. And again, this is 95, okay? Just to kind of give you guys an example. So all of these people within the group are working for these different companies, and they have a lot of computer skills, and they're working directly. Now, there is an employee that remains anonymous that worked for the General Insurance Agency, and she got really close to these 3 individuals that were part of this group, and they would talk about their lives. So they stated during this time in 95 that they would wake up every day at 3 a.m. They would pray and look at the stars until about 5. And then they would all have a really large meal. But then the rest of the day, they would eat fruit and then drink this lemon concoction, which was like lemons and cayenne pepper. And it was like a drink that they would drink the rest of the day. Now, this is all in 1995. Kind of at this same time, you had this group in 95 that some are in California working on computers and with these companies, and then some are in New Mexico, and they are doing computer work. They are renting offices, but they are in a different place. Now, by April of 1996, the people that are out in New Mexico, they are told to sell that property, and everybody that's kind of not in California is being pulled to California, and they're not happy about it. So they're talking to outside people, and they're like, yeah, we have to go back to California, and we're not thrilled about it. Now, by September of 1996, the group is living in different homes that they're renting around that same area in San Diego, like outside of San Diego to the north. Well, by October, Herff moves the whole group, because they had been kind of renting, like, let's say 5 different properties, and the group is about 40 individuals, and they're all in different places. But Herff decides to put everybody under one roof. Well, he moves them into this massive home, like 9,200 square foot mansion located on over 3 acres in the community of Rancho Sante Fe. Now, these locals call this area the ranch. Like, it is beautiful, and it is high end, very high end. The population of this community, and it's not a town, it's not a city, it's a community, is like 12,000 people or so. The average income, again, this is 1996, is $163,000 a year. The average home is at least $1 million, with maybe only 4 people living in it, okay? And again, 1996. So the home that Herff rents is located at 1824 Colina Norte, and it's in this Rancho Sante Fe community. Now, the home is owned by a man named Sam, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's Kuchafahani. The rent on this home is $10,000 a month. And again, this house is huge. This is a very nice. We're talking. These houses are gated. It's on 3+ acres. You cannot see the home from, like, if you're entering the driveway. It's like a windy driveway up to the home. It's just a beautiful area, very high end. People had moved out to this area who had like show ponies, their race horses. Like they called it the ranch because a lot of the people had like horses. Okay. Now, it's said to be 9 bedrooms, 9 baths. Some sources said 7 beds, 7 baths, but it's a huge home. It has like an elevator in it. It's basically all of the homes in the community are kind of like the Spanish Mediterranean look, and it has like the red tiled roofs or whatever, but it is a sprawling, huge home. It has a tennis court. It has an in-ground pool. It has everything. And just kind of a little side note. So Sam, the owner, he had been renting the home before. He had also listed the house for sale. So the house was listed for $1.595 million. So that's how much he was selling it for. And during this time, he is like, realtors have it, they're showing the house or whatever. Now, the house had been there since 1983, and Sam had purchased it in 1994. The people of the ranch, like, again, very high end, they're very into their privacy. They don't want anyone, they're probably some nosy neighbors going on, but like these lots are huge. The homes are huge. Like, they don't want people bothering them. Okay. That's the way it is. Now, again, the group makes their money on websites. And of course, this is a very upscale area. And so as soon as they move in, they actually approach one of the businesses in the ranch area, and it's the San Diego Polo Club. So they actually approach the club about handling their websites. The club hires them, and the club will say later how professional they were. They were definitely odd, especially when we get into their looks, but like, they were very good. They were professional, nice, got the job done, like everything. And they were also much cheaper than other website building businesses. That was another thing. So they were doing this like very, still expensive, but very cheaper than other companies. Now, the members, they are all living now in this one place. Okay. We're talking like 39 of them, 40 at this point. Okay. Like, because some members are leaving towards the end, but like, there are a lot of people in one house, but they do have certain protocols. They have certain things that they are doing. They have approved shows and banned shows. So basically, they can watch Chicago Hope. They can watch the show Voyager. I don't know what that is. Deep Space Nine. I don't know if anyone remembers these shows of the 90s. I remember X-Files. They could watch X-Files. They could watch Star Trek, and they could watch a show called Millennium. So these were okay. And they also kept up with current events. They were keeping up. They watched 60 Minutes. They subscribed to a San Diego Union Tribune. They also were watching the sky because they were very into, obviously, UFOs, whatever. So they were getting this Galactic Observer newsletter monthly or weekly. And they really preferred watching things like TV and movies over reading books. Like, they weren't that into reading books, which I thought was interesting. But they also kept their home, like something about them. They were meticulous, and this will be discussed, but they were meticulous in how they kept their home, how they kept their records, all their money. Again, all their money is pooled, and they were meticulous as far as how much money they had, how much money they were spending. Like, they had a ledger and kept it up. Now, banned movies, I thought this was really interesting, included, and wasn't exclusive to this, but included The Island of Dr. Moreau. I've never seen that. Multiplicity. I did see that. And Goldeneye. I guess that's the James Bond movie of the 90s. I don't know. Anyway, those movies were banned. Now, during this time, the group actually gets $1,000 policy. I guess they were paying $1,000 a month for an insurance policy which covered them for alien abductions. They had evidently found this online and they purchased this and it's so interesting. This company kind of in the future would not move forward. They would actually close down their alien abduction insurance after the mass suicides happen. So anyway, I have so many questions on that, but did they, oh, that's just terrible. That's just fraud. I don't know. I don't think that would float these days, would it? No, I don't think so. But the 90s were weird. So there you go. But this is what the group was paying for. Now, to kind of backtrack just for a second, or I should say just some little tidbits or side notes. So there was an Order of the Solar Temple cult group that had kind of, and they were in Switzerland, by the way. They were kind of based there, but they had kind of members all over the world. But they had a mass suicide situation in 1994, just to kind of give some background. Now, this and what they had said was they were believing they were killing themselves, and this would lead for them to be transported to a different world called Sirius. So this is going on in the world, and of course, they would have, when I say they, Doe would have known this, Herff would have known this. So again, it's kind of an example of, okay, did they see this? And also going on in the world, you did have the whole Jim Jones that happened way back that they knew about, that they kind of thought about. And then also the whole David Koresh thing happened. So they're kind of watching this. You also had the Unabombers, Ruby Ridge, and I won't get deep into that, but there were just these fringe activities that were going on. And so again, it's just kind of another example of maybe Herff and them taking away, like seeing something else that happened and then kind of going on there. And you'll kind of see some more of that. There's not a whole lot of, to me, original thought going on with this group. So also a little side note, I just found this interesting, but the owner of the house, that Sam Kucha Fahani, so at the time that the whole, in 1997, he pleads guilty to tax evasion. So he allegedly took $350,000 from Middle Eastern students between the time frame of 1989 to 1995, and using the money to bribe colleges to enroll these illegal students. Okay, he was kind of paying for this to happen. He was taking the money and getting them enrolled and trying to certify these people as legal California residents. So anyway, he is not, I will say, at the time of March 1997 of the incident, he is actually been indicted. He pled guilty to these charges of tax evasion, but he hadn't been sentenced. And I went back and tried to find anything about that, and I did find some information about him, but not necessarily about what kind of jail time he faced, because he was also involved in he was kind of being a informant for the government. So yeah, so I think he was kind of playing a deal with the government by pleading guilty. So I can't really see if he actually even served actual prison time, because he was out on bail, he was awaiting sentencing, but then he was also an informant. So this is the owner of the house. Yes, it's so crazy. So anyway, so kind of another thing kind of going on at this time. So we talked about the Hell Bop situation. So you had that situation going on. Well, at the same time, you had a couple of conspiracy theorist. One was named Art Bell. He kind of had his own conspiracy theory like radio show. And he basically thought there was someone that had called into the show. There were a couple of people that called into a show, and they were like, there is something with this comet. There's something behind it. So this information, then the group kind of takes a hold of, and they're like, well, we believe that the Hale-Bopp comet, period, whether there's something behind it or not, is coming for us. It has, and this thing behind it, they felt like was the UFO coming to get them. And then lo and behold, this whole theory falls apart. There's nothing accompanying the Hale-Bopp. There's nothing to it. It was just kind of debunked. Okay, it was fraud. So bottom line is that by January of 1997, the team, the members, the group, they purchase a $3,645 telescope. And they basically say, we want to look at the Hale-Bopp comet. So they buy this telescope. This was the time frame where the comet was going to be close enough to Earth. And in fact, like, this comet was incredibly bright. Like, people could see it with just their eyes. A lot of people just used like, what are those, binoculars? Like, this comet was incredibly bright. It was the brightest comet since, like, I want to say the 1500s or something like that. It was crazy. Well, anyway, they wanted to see this comet. They stated that there was a spaceship coming to get them. They wanted to see it. And it turns out the group, even though they were enlightened in some ways, they were really, they didn't have any information or any basic telescope or astrology knowledge at all. Like, nothing. So they end up taking the telescope back to the store. They said it didn't work. The store clerk, he states that a man named Craig, who looked like Herff, came into the store, and another man came into the store, and we'll kind of get into that. Two men came into the store, and they didn't know anything about telescope work. They had no actual knowledge. They only had Star Trek references, in fact. And so that happened in January. And then I will say, backing up a little bit. So at this time, you finally have their quote unquote website. So of course, these people are building websites by 95, 96. They are building their own website. And of course, it's kind of, at first they have it in under like New Horizons, but then they do come up with the name Heaven's Gate. And when I say come up with, so at this time in 95 and 96, there was already like a movie named Heaven's Gate. But Herff knew about this movie, but he liked the name of it. It sounded like, okay, we're going to be entering into Heaven's Gate. And at this time, he had already talked to the group about exiting because Herff, the edit on that, Herff had talked to the group about going ahead and ending it so that they could meet up to the next level, because several things were happening. First, Herff told the group that he felt like his vehicle, his body, was sick. Like, first, he told them, okay, I feel sick. Also, the year 2000 was coming, and he had told his group that Jesus was actually in 4 BC, and so he advised that really the time was near. And so they started their quote unquote exit plan. Remember the time frame where they were selling the land and bringing everybody into California? That was the time for that. It was like April of 1996. So he's telling them, hey, we're getting ready to go. They start to kind of combine, and that's when they're all living together and combining together and all of this. So this is all happening kind of really quickly from 1996 into 1997. So now also in January of 1997, the people that were working at that general insurance agency, so they announced to their boss that they're leaving. And the company, I mean, they were really good workers. They were good at their jobs. They were reliable and polite and all these good things. So the company really wanted to keep them. Well, the workers were like, no, we can't. So The workers would note later on, and this is literally January of 1997, they're kind of finished by the end of that month, by February. So they remark how nervous these individuals were as they were nearing the completion of their job, okay? So note that. On Wednesday, March 26th of 1997, so the group, again, they're all together living in California. Now, the San Diego County Sheriff's Office, they get an anonymous call requesting a welfare check at the address, the 1824 Colina Norte, Rancho Sante Fe. Now, the caller states, quote unquote, well, I think there was a religious group that committed suicide. So the emergency dispatcher, like they immediately dispatch this information out. They originally think that this is a crank call. Like nobody is taking this seriously at all. And typically welfare checks weren't a high priority anyway. Now, a second anonymous call comes in, and I will say this call is made at 1:30 p.m. on the Wednesday, the March 26th. Now, a little bit later, a second anonymous call comes in about the mass suicide, same address, and this time the caller called the Beverly Hills Police Department. Now, by this time, it is 3:30 p.m., and a deputy is told to go check out the situation. Now, a deputy named Robert Brunk, he goes to the address, and of course, he has to wind through this whole long driveway to even get to the house. And when he gets there, he does note some vehicles in the driveway. Like he can see a van, he can see some vehicles. He does evidently call in the license plate, and it doesn't kind of go back to the owner of the property. And so he's kind of suspicious. Well, at this point, he goes up to the front door. He rings the doorbell, and the front doorbell, it is locked. In fact, all the windows are shut. The curtains are drawn. The outside lights are on the house. Like it's a very eerie situation. Okay. Like he can kind of tell, okay, there's vehicles here. The house is shut up and these lights are on. And he can also tell, like he can kind of hear like the air conditioner is running in the house because he could, he's kind of walking around the house. So he is getting kind of pretty creeped out by this scene because it's just not adding up. So he does make his way to the side of the house, and he sees a door, and he goes up to it. He finds that it's unlocked. And when he rang the doorbell, he had, he's calling out, San Diego deputy, all these things. Now, when he opens this side door, he immediately, he says, is hit with a horrendous stench, like this rotten, just horrible smell. And immediately he knows it's the smell. Like he's like, this is death. This is absolute death. So he's calling out again into the house. The house now is open, and he's saying, San Diego County deputies, nothing. There are absolutely no signs of people. No one's, calling out. So he is not, by law or protocol, I should say, he is not supposed to enter a home alone. Okay. So he radios for backup for another deputy to come. So he waits. Another deputy arrives. Her name is Laura Gasick. Now, Laura, this door is open. Okay. It's just an open door. And as she gets about 10 feet from the door, she immediately smells this horrible, putrid, noxious smell from outside. This is outside. This is how bad this smell is. Now, both deputies, they go in. Now, some accounts say that they are at this point wearing at least a surgical cover on their face. Other accounts just say they walk in, and it's kind of like a mud room. Immediately they kind of see tons of shoes, tennis shoes, sandals, whatever, lined up like a very large family lives in this house. Like there's tons of shoes, but they're all neat and tidy and lined up. They walk into this kitchen and it is immaculate. It is completely picked up. This officer, Brunk, he will state later on that the only thing he does see that's kind of out of place on the counter is kind of like a cockroach, like a bug, kind of turned up on its back and like it's alive, but it's struggling. And this immediately bothers him because he's like, ugh. Like he sees that and he's just like, ugh. And it's out of proportions. Like he said that this kitchen is so clean. Like he pretty much states later on that the kitchen was as clean as a Safeway chicken. I don't know what that means, but I guess it's like a restaurant or like I don't know. Like he's saying how clean this home is. Okay. So they do go inside. They're kind of moving into the house and it's dark. Like there's some lights on, but they're having to, all of the windows are shut. The curtains are drawn. Like they're having to adjust their eyes. As the officers are kind of moving into the house, they come across a body laying on a mattress on the floor. And this body is prone, lying on its back. All they can tell is that this body has like a purple cloth over the whole upper body, like the head and the chest are covered in a purple cloth. And then there's black pants and black and white tennis shoes. That's all they can see. And then Gasek points to a side room and they see like there's bunk beds and there are more bodies shrouded just the same in the purple. And so they kind of proceed kind of closer to where the side door was. They come to like another body on a collapsible table and then more bodies on mattresses. So just on the bottom floor in what they were seeing, they encounter 10 bodies right away. They immediately kind of back up. They can kind of, the air conditioning is blowing. There's like computer screens on. One screen says Heaven Gate and has like an alert on it. All they can tell, they kind of pull back to see if there's any type of pulse, and these individuals just look, the bodies are decomposed. The bodies have really short hair, and so they don't even know what they're looking at. They just think they're looking at young men based on the way that they're dressed. So the two deputies are absolutely horrified. And then Robert Brunk will later say, he remembers that cockroach in the kitchen. He's like, we have no idea like how these individuals died. So immediately they are like frightened. They've got the stench, the horrible stench. There's like this chemical component. They are frightened. They have no idea like what's happened to these people. So immediately they back out of the home and call for backup and explain what they've come across. Now, they're outside. Detectives are arriving. Higher ups are arriving. In the meantime, of course, what else arrives? Reporters, neighborhoods, people are starting to notice things going on. Deputy Brunk and then Deputy Gasek, they are told to go to the hospital just to get checked out. They have no idea what's happened to them. The higher ups call for the hazardous material team to come in, and they also need a search warrant. So in the meantime, so all of this started at about 3:30 p.m. By probably like 4:30 p.m., it is just chaos at the scene, and all they can do is wait, okay? Now, deputies Brunk and Gasek are checked out. They are fine. They were not exposed to any dangerous toxins like what they were thinking. By the time, of course, it takes several hours for the hazardous team to come out and inspect the property too, to make sure that the house is not toxic. So all of this, the search warrant and the hazardous team, they come out. They don't finish up until about 11:30 p.m. Okay. Now, by this time, they have had people inside the hazardous team. They've gone around the house. They have counted bodies. And so and that's all they've done. So at this point, the things that are getting spread is that there are, originally it was said, okay, there's like 10 bodies. These are young men that are in, these are like the news reports going out. Now, as the evening goes, that report is brought up to 39 bodies, but they still believe that these are men. And so across the country, this is almost immediately like national news, and these special reports are going out. Now, the investigators, once they are cleared into the home, they go in and they're exploring the house. And of course, they are finding that there are, throughout the first floor, all that Brunk and Gasek had found were about 10 bodies. There were actually 18 bodies located on just the first floor. And these bodies are scattered throughout, like there's a living room, there's an office space, they have a computer room, they have some bedrooms. Like, these people are scattered out, and they're seeing that, yes, these bodies are decomposing. They are prone. They're all on their back. They're covered in like these purple cloths. They're finding like a bag packed by the people. If the people had eyeglasses, they are rolled up neat, and everything is neat, absolutely neat. And they're finding that these people are, very lined up, like staged almost. And then they do come across 2 bodies that are not shrouded. And now these bodies, they're not as decomposed, but they do have plastic bags over their heads, but it looks like they were struggling with these plastic bags, okay? And they did look at the bodies to see if there was any type of trauma or anything. They couldn't see that on the other shrouded bodies, but all they notice is there are 2 bodies that are very different from the other bodies. But in all, they have 39 bodies at this scene. So they had 18 on the bottom floor. They have another 21 bodies on the top floor. And they do notice in the master bedroom that there is 1 person laying in the middle of a king-size bed. Okay, so this is the only person that's by themselves, so to speak, and on their own. So the scene is incredibly disturbing. Okay, and they're finding that all of these bodies are wearing matching clothing. Like, everything is the same. They're wearing like black pants. They're wearing a buttoned up black top. They're wearing brand new Nike tennis shoes that are black and white. They're wearing, like, on their top, on the left shoulder of the top, there is a triangular patch that says Heaven's Gate Away Team. So that's what they're finding. They've already seen like the computers, like we mentioned. Now, all of the bodies have short hair, and all of the bodies have a gold wedding band on their ring, like the wedding finger. Okay, like that left hand. And all of the bodies, based on like them looking further, do have identification. Like, they have bags, and then they have little bags that are packed with just personal items and such. But everything is very neat except for those 2 bodies that I mentioned. Now, I mentioned that the purple cloth was laid over the chest, and basically it was a triangular purple cloth that was covering like the head and chest, like the point on the head. Now, later on, it would be conceded that purple was Bonnie's favorite color. Now, the 2 bodies that we mentioned that were not covered like the others, that just had the plastic bags that looked like they had struggled. Now, these 2 were 2 nurses in the group. One's name is Susan Strom, and one's name is Julie LaMontague. Later on in toxicology, they will find that Susan and Julie had high levels of Vicodin in their blood, like it had been injected. And like I said, the bags over the women's head showed signs of them like pushing and struggling against them, like they were struggling to breathe in their kind of final moments there. These police are working kind of all through the night. Okay, they didn't even get their clearance to go into the house until about 11:30. Now, a Lieutenant Jerry Lipscomb is on the scene, and he is a veteran homicide detective at the time, and he states he had never seen anything like this in his life. He said the scene was utterly devastating to the officers. There were countless law enforcement that were brought in. There were 20 or so deputies, and the actual sheriff of San Diego County, his name is Bill Collender, and then his undersheriff was there, a Jack Brown. They had even called in the California state governor who had been out of town. So everybody was called to this scene. And the California state governor at the time was Pete Wilson. And everybody is shocked and just like, whoa. Like, this is the largest mass suicide on U.S. soil to this day. So this was extremely shocking. Now, the officers are working the whole scene. They're taking pictures of everything. They're noting that each body, like we mentioned, had a bag packed. It had personal items, clothes, hygiene, identification, like driver's license, ID cards, birth certificates, passports. Like, each body had identification on it. And as the police were documenting, they're also calling in, of course, now the medical examiner's office. And the chief medical examiner at the time was a Dr. Bryson Blackburn. It is in the early morning hours whenever the medical examiner's team can actually begin working the bodies, because remember, the police hadn't even gotten clearance until about 11:30 p.m. So now we're rolled into March 27th. So in the master bedroom of the home, in the middle of a king-size bed, there was only one body. Now, this would later be identified, of course, as Herff. So he was just alone, master bedroom, just himself in the middle of the bed. Now, the team of medical examiners, and there was literally a team of them. There were 15 investigators and 8 medical examiners, and they would even have like mortuary attendants. There were 3 of those, 1 coroner lieutenant helping them out from LA County. So they were getting help from everywhere. I mean, this is a large amount of bodies to move. Now, the actual kind of a side note, back in 1978, the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office had actually worked a PSA jet line that crashed and had 128 passengers on board and 7 crew. So they had definitely seen their fair share of horrific things, but that was literally in 1978. Now, as they're kind of loading up the first bodies, it's around 6 a.m. The police, of course, there's a strong police presence still. Reporters are everywhere. Remember this, there is a Mark Malamatos that works for the ME's office. He had been there for about 3 years. He describes to the reporters that the scene looked peaceful. All of the bodies are wrapped up in white sheets. They're put in body bags. Now, at this point, they haven't released any information, so they're loading all the bodies up, all 39 bodies. And by around 9 a.m., all of the bodies are delivered to the actual ME's office. And they bring along the backpacks. They had like backpacks packed, as we mentioned. There were suitcases. So they bring all of those along. They are working these bodies. They literally had to get a $60,000. There were 2 multi-decedent recovery transport vehicles. Each of these could hold 14 people, to kind of give you an idea of body capacity. So Yeah, they had two of these going on in multiple other places for the bodies. Now, they take fingerprints, they have to weigh the bodies, the measurements. They're searching the bodies for, all the personal papers, which we discussed. They did have identification, jewelry. And kind of at the same time, of course, detectives are working the scene. So multiple things are going on. The detectives are tracking down the anonymous caller, which we'll get into right now. So the anonymous caller is a man named Richard Ford. So he had actually been a member, and they called him, whenever he was in the Heaven's Gate, he was called Rio D'Angelo. So that was kind of, I guess, his alias within the group. And now I'm going to call him Richard. Richard left the group about 6 weeks before this. So sometime in February, he had gone to Herff and just kind of told him that he just wasn't comfortable with everything, that he felt like he had a different purpose, quote unquote, as far as going to the next level, and that he felt like he needed to be, not go with them and be around to actually like write about the group and so on. So he left on good terms, and so Rio was working for one of these computer companies contracted out by the higher source. Richard was working for a man named Nick Matzorkis. So Nick Matzorkis had hired Richard and some of the others, and Richard received a package, like a FedEx package, actually on Tuesday, the 25th. So he actually didn't even open the package until Wednesday morning. Now, in the package, there was a note to him discussing how, it was the exit tapes, like the crew had made exit tapes, which we'll get into, but they had a note to him that just basically outlined that they had exited and that by the time he got this package, they would be gone, but that he needed to go to the home and actually videotape. They wanted him to videotape everything that they found, and he wanted to have all these sources just in case like their website went down. Like, they were very adamant about Richard documenting what they had done. So Richard goes in immediately upon finding this package Wednesday morning. He's at work and he tells Nick what's up. And so Nick actually drives Richard over to Colina Norte. They go to the house. Or Nick doesn't go into the house. He's like, I'm not going in. But he lets Richard go in. Richard goes in and literally finds the group, and sees what they had done. And he does exactly as they told him to. He films. So he takes a film. He has his paper package that they had sent him, documentation. And so after that happens, then that's when he makes the anonymous call, the first anonymous call. And then he ends up making the call to the Beverly Hills Police Department. So that's the anonymous caller situation. And that will be Richard. He will be interviewed after the point, and it's interesting to see that he didn't want to go, quote unquote, with the group, but he still seems pretty indoctrined, kind of similar to Sawyer. So that's interesting to me. Now, okay, the bodies, of course, you have the neighbors, you have a lot going on. So you have the transporting of the bodies. It's about 9 o'clock the next morning. You have all kinds of reporters out. They're talking to the neighbors, of course. And the neighbors are just kind of like, they're kind of ooh about the situation, I hate to say. Like, they're making little comments. One local resident there says, "We used to think this was a slice of heaven. Now it feels like a slice of hell." That was one comment. And another comment was, when the people were finding out what was happening, they were relieved and making comments about, well, these were just renters, quote unquote. So it was kind of like, yeah, they really didn't want to be associated with this whole horrific scene in this very posh situation that the ranch was. Now, back at the coroner's office, they're actually diving into who, what, where. And just to kind of give an idea, of course, they are doing all the things, they're starting the autopsies. So, in the course of the autopsies, they are finding now that there were actually 21 women and then 18 men. And they are able to do 8 autopsies at a time. And they are finding that based on decomposition, that some of the bodies had been there at least 3 to 4 days. So, just to kind of give you guys an idea of kind of what that looked like, because we talked about, like the stench, just the smell that was going on, right away when the deputy Brunk entered the home. So when a body is indoors for 3 to 4 days, the human body primarily experiences what they call the bloat stage. So the body is bloated, there is significant what they call putrefaction. The skin is going to become greenish in discoloration. There's going to be a strong odor. And then there's also going to be leakage from orifices. So, and part of that, the body is just going to almost double in size due to the internal organs producing bacteria, and there's even going to be skin slippage. So these bodies, some of these bodies were in that situation whenever they were found. So definitely a very gruesome scene. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary. You can see the documentary, and they show footage of Richard's tape, and there's nothing to see because he's just going through. He's seeing, the people are lying on the mattresses. They are covered. They're, pretty well covered. Well, in some of the instances, there is literally a hand sticking out, and it just looks like black, and the hand is huge, huge. So this was definitely the situation that everybody was encountering. And so again, some of these bodies, they will determine that the medical examiner's office definitely did toxicology on top of the autopsies, but they couldn't see any type of trauma. They do determine that based on toxicology for the most part, and based on what they actually found in the house, because there was actually a recipe for a mixture. So what the crew did was they took vodka and what's called phenobarbital, and they laced this, the phenobarbital was kind of, I guess, crushed up or laced in pudding or applesauce. And a phenobarbital is a barbiturate. And basically, this drug is used for people with a seizure disorder. It kind of calms the body down. It's used for sleep. If people are insomniacs and they can't sleep, they'll kind of let them have it. But this is kind of a big deal drug. It is a barbiturate. Not everybody gets it, but if you have seizure disorder, if you have insomnia, sometimes they'll use it for anxiety. I would think a severe case of anxiety. But they had this phenobarbital, and then when you take the phenobarbital, and we're talking, you would have to have quite a bit of this drug in your system. But when you mix that with vodka, or alcohol, it increases its ability. And basically, it goes in and just kind of puts you to sleep, and it shuts down your system. You basically stop breathing. And so, what happened based on what they could see of the two remaining was that the people they ingested the phenobarbital through the pudding mixture, applesauce mixture. They drank vodka with it. And then they laid down, and then they were covered in the plastic bag to kind of help, quote unquote, with the slowing down of the breathing. So basically, they just slipped into a sleep situation, but cause of death was definitely determined to be a combination of the vodka, phenobarbital, and the plastic bag, so asphyxiation. So it was kind of a combination of these things that actually killed the people. Now, also what they're finding, and then they did, like I said, the two final women had, on top of that, they had Vicodin in their system. So they had taken Vicodin plus this phenobarbital and put the bags over their heads as well. But there was obvious distress because they were, what was happening is basically these two, they kind of determined based on documentation found in the house and then the decomposition. But the first wave of people to die was about 15 of them were assisted in dying. They're cleaned up. They're put the purple shroud on. And then there's another wave of 15. So it's like 15 went, they determined probably by like the Saturday, I want to say, or the Sunday, which would have been by the 22nd. Yeah, so they were found the 26th. So by the 22nd, the first wave of individuals were, going through this process, the exit process that they called it. And then the next wave was another 15. And then now you're down to the last 9. And so the women helped 7 more go. And then they went, of course, last. So they were just basically like, the reason why everybody looked so peaceful is because they were doing this in waves. And Herff was actually in the second wave. So he wasn't in the first 15, he was in the second 15 to go based on his decomposition. By this time, they have identification on these people. These people had identification. They found on their bodies. They also weirdly found $5.75, which this would come up later as part of like this Mark Twain uh, kind of poem thing that if you have this, you can make it to heaven. Like if you have that amount of money on you, you can make it to heaven. But they did have driver's license passports. And of course, this is all over the news. So people across the country are calling in. In fact, by Thursday, they've had about 1,500 calls from people across the country looking for their loved ones. And the detectives are talking, the ME investigators are talking to people. They're like, why would this happen? How they're trying to piece this all together, like why, how. So along with the autopsies going on, they do also find that, there were 18 men in the group. 8 of them had castration. So 8 of them had had their testicles removed, and castration is not something that's done in the mainstream. So Dr. Blackburn, he's like, this wouldn't have been, the only reason, I guess, to ever castrate a man and have a doctor actually do it legally would be a diagnosis of cancer. And so, but 8 of these men, they showed old signs. So, old signs. This has already happened. And their testicles were removed, which would stop the production of testosterone. And discussing this from, in the documentary, they talk about, Sawyer talks about this. He never got castrated or whatever, but we'll kind of talk about it. One of the men that was very adamant, he actually came up, it wasn't really Herff that came up with it, but Herff was one of the castrated. So he was one of them, and then 7 other members, but so there would have been 10 of the men that were not castrated. So that they're finding this situation. And of course, this is just very, very alarming. The police are trying to figure out, who, what, where. They're investigating, looking through the house. They are finding everything there. Of course, everyone's on high alarm across the country. The governor gives out a statement to reporters, and he says, to call it bizarre is, I think, to understate it. So this is his statement to police. There's just, others in California are upset that these quote unquote kooks come from all other places but die there in California, make Californians look crazy, and really it's just the people from other places. So people are starting to hear as more and more information leaks out. And so, people all over the country are actually going to the Heaven's Gate website, and the website is crashing from just the amount of clicks that are happening. Now, ultimately, the medical examiner's office would state it seems like this was a group decision and was very well planned, sort of immaculately carried out. So they're talking about how this was carried out. Now, there are vigils being held. The Red Cross had come in to kind of help the coroner's assistance. Of course, they can, they're having to use like forklifts whenever they were carting the bodies in. It's just a very huge endeavor on that end of things. And it was just absolutely horrendous situation as far as the bodies. Now, we discussed that Richard Ford, or Rio, had received this package. There were other packages that were sent out across the country as well. Now, one group, he really didn't understand why he received it, but a Reverend Rick Strawcutter, he was with the Church of the Lord Jesus, and he's in Michigan, and he receives this package. He'll end up, talking to the press about it, and he's like, I really don't know why I received it. Like, he didn't know the group at all, so he was kind of, curious as to why he received this package. He didn't really understand that situation. Now, as you can imagine, others weighing into this situation with the press was, the owner of the house, Sam, the owner of the house. So he is discussing that at first he says that he didn't know that so many people were living in the house. He did know it was like a religious group that was living in the house. And then, of course, come to find out, a lot more people had been in the house because they had been showing the house to people. And so there was a Scott Warren, who was a realtor. He mentioned that when he showed the house, there was definitely a bizarreness going on there. You had to put on slippers because the house was the temple for the group, and they wouldn't allow for you to wear shoes in the house. And he said there were all these people in the house, always there when they were showing the house. So it wasn't like a hidden thing, but the Sam character, he made it sound like he did not realize who was actually in the house. They had told Sam that not to show the house during Holy Week. So basically, the crew is found March 26th on the Wednesday. Well, Friday was Good Friday, and then Easter was coming. So Easter would have been on the 30th. So they had told the owner of the house, hey, please do not show the house. This is our Holy Week. So that's kind of how they kept everybody out or from bothering them during this exiting time, okay? Leading into this, of course, they are experiencing, the police are finding out more and more about the group as they're investigating. So in March, to celebrate their exit, and they had made this plan to exit kind of, we talked about this, kind of at the time that they sold the property in New Mexico, brought everyone to California. Unclear exactly, but obviously they had a plan whenever even they rented this house. So it was kind of like we're going to do this type of thing. So celebrating the exit, which is interesting, they spend $664 for an entry into a wild animal park. Now, before this, in February, they actually rent a bus. So they rent like a charter bus, and they go on a many day trip, so several days. Now, they go into Tijuana, and this is an important aspect because the police, they can never figure out how this group got that much phenobarbital, because they would have had to have like 50 pills or so per person. So we're talking 39 people, 50 pills. Now, They do know that they go into Tijuana, and in Tijuana, like not in the US, but in Mexico, you could easily get phenobarbital. Like, you can purchase it. You don't have to have a prescription or anything like that. So this was important aspect to the police because they figured that's when they actually got the phenobarbital. Now, they go on this bus trip. They go to Tijuana, they go to Santa Rosa, they go to Sacramento, they go to this place called Gold Beach. Like, they are doing this whole tour of Mexico, California. Gold Beach is kind of one of the beaches that the group kind of started out in. So that they were going on just this quest, and they were having a great time. And whenever they're going around, like, they they're spending money, they're doing fun things. So they were very literal. Of course, their house was very nice. They kept everything nice. They kept their money also very, like, detailed. So their detailed money. They had $12,183.21 in an account. So, and this ledger for the account was meticulous. And then they had $5,400 in cash hidden inside the house as well. Now, the ledger in March, they spend $1,092, and the group goes to SeaWorld. They spend $663 on the new clothes that they would wear for their exit. They also work on what they call their exit tapes, which you can actually watch these tapes, but they discuss their leaving. They discuss their stance that they don't feel like this is suicide. They feel like basically staying on Earth is a suicide mission, and that they are going to the next level, to graduate. It's not suicide to them. So they even start working on these exit tapes on March 19th. And Herff is involved. All the students are leaving the exit tapes. And I watched many of them, and, you know, some of them are a little emotional, but pretty much they kind of follow suit with Herff. They talk about tea, and some of these people didn't even like know tea at all, by the way. So, and some did, but some did not. And they're just talking about their exit. And for the most part, they do seem very happy. Now, one of the students, literally in her exit tape, she states, maybe these people are crazy for all I know. I've been on this planet 31 years and there's been nothing here for me. That's how she felt. Like, maybe this is crazy, but hey, I've not seen anything better, basically. So that was part of the exit for this individual. But for the most part, they were, just like, bye, like, see you later. Also, so they're doing these exit tapes. They know exactly when and what they're going to do. They have a whole plan. And afterwards, they go get pizza. They spend $417.27 on pizza, and then they go to a movie and they spend about $75 for sodas at the movies. And they see a movie called Secrets and Lies. It says that this movie is an improvised script, and it explores family secrets, emotional healing. Yeah, I don't recognize any of the people in this film. It's a Brenda Blethyn, a Marianne, Jean Baptiste, Timothy Spall. I don't know. It went to the Cannes Film Festival. A Best Actress award was won through it, but it says it was a comedy drama. So that's what they went to see at the movies that night. And this was after they discussed leaving the planet. As you can see, kind of leading up to this, the group was eating out, they were enjoying themselves, they were going on trips. They were pretty much doing everything that they said that they didn't do. And then even in the death situation, they don't drink, they don't do drugs, but that's exactly the route that they took to exit. So I do think that's very interesting and very on par with Herff's whole thing mentality the whole time about the flexibility and kind of doing whatever he says to do. Now, we discussed the mixture the procedure for the death, the mixing of the phenobarbital with the pudding and applesauce. So investigators do find that this recipe wasn't anything new, but it actually came from a controversial book called The Final Exit. So this is where the group had gotten this idea from as far as their exit plan. Many of the families, upon finding out, they were shocked, they were horrified. Some were finding out on the news. One member of the group, his name is Alfonso Richard Foster. His sisters, Felicia and Juanita, were watching a special report on the TV, and this is how they found out about this. And they had not been in contact with him for 20 years. And like I said, after the news came out, people were interviewing Sam, the owner. His attorney, his name is Mr. Silverman. He states that he always did business with the oldest member of the group, which went by Father John, which was Herff. Now, there was another member of the group, and they called him Brother Logan, and he was a very tall man. We'll kind of get into that and talk about him, but he was the kind of second in command to Herff. Now, again, the week leading into this, kind of coming up, they said that they didn't want any showings of the house because of Holy Week, Easter coming. So Silverman basically states that he knew the group was a religious group. They seemed to be very peaceful, sincere, very loving people. That he thought that they were like monks, that they talked about how they were celibate, they didn't drink or smoke or do anything like that. And they also had told him that they were angels sent to earth. Now, afterwards, after all this happened, the group had actually mailed Sam a letter with a check, basically like back rent, prorated rent, and they thanked him for his friendship. So they pretty much like tidied up everything that they were doing. I mean, it's just very tidy situation. Now, I told you about the little side note about Sam K and his tax evasion case and such, but I could not find, again, I could not find where he ended up going to jail or anything, but just a little tidbit. So after this whole horrendous thing happens, so this happens in March, people are really wanting him to move into the property, like his realtors are telling him. They get the house completely cleaned up. The house was covered in the bodily fluids from the group, from the passing. So it was a really horrific thing to clean up. But the house is cleaned. And then Sam even hosts a pool party for his 13-year-old son on the property in July. So I'll kind of talk about that. But a Calvin Vines, he's with the medical examiner's office. So he was actually responsible for calling all the families, and he would notate how the families would sob, as soon as they find out that and now on the flip side, some of the families were absolutely embarrassed about the situation and didn't want their names released at all. And there was just a lot of just some hard feelings there, of course, on top of these sad feelings there. Now, during the investigation of the house, the police, of course, they had found everything on the people. It was just like personal objects, their identifications, but they do find that the group has 2 storage sheds rented by members, and they're very close to it. It was in a town called Escondido, which is just right there by the ranch. Now, they find in storage shed, they find 2 assault rifles with scopes. They find a rifle. They find 3 revolvers, and then they find books, videotapes, and furniture. Now, they do find 0 evidence because they do process the guns and look at the guns. So there's 0 evidence of the guns being fired. And of course, there wasn't any indication on the bodies of such. But inside the house, in one of the suitcases that came with the members, there was a 9mm gun. And one of the ex-members does state that that was used for target practice. But again, there was 0 evidence found of the gun being fired or being used in any way with the group at the time of their death or anything like that. Now, we talked about the families. On top of them being, upset, some of the families really wanted the bodies cleared of HIV and AIDS before they would take back the bodies. So they wanted to make sure that the bodies were clean. They were just very seen or talked to some of these people in years, and at this time frame, I know it's hard for people to understand in 1997, but that was a scary thing, quote unquote. It wasn't what it is now as far as treatments and so forth, but they were very, I don't know, for some reason they were very concerned about HIV and AIDS on these people, and there wasn't any sign of that. I mean, they were literally celibate. So, and some of them missing their male organs. Many people, of course, came forward with their encounters of the group, and it seemed like the biggest thing that people were saying, and just like with Mr. Silverman talking about the group and how nice and professional and whatever that they were, but many people came forward and talked about the politeness of the group. Anytime that they went out in public, whether it was to eat, because the group had, you know, gone to some restaurants, they would hang out in a cafe situation. Like they just talked about how polite they were. Now, obviously, they have really short hair. They're kind of looking androgynous. That a lot of people, just thought that they had cancer, honestly, because of the short hair situation. And some of the men would shave their heads. So that's what they thought. And again, we talked about people holding vigils, like right there at the medical examiner's office. Now, obviously, there was a lot of intrigue on the website. And again, the website crashes, and we'll kind of get into the website on that. There is a company, just a lot of terrible people come forward in these times, and they're like selling copies of the website's reports for like $24.90 on the webs different sites. They're trying to capitalize the deaths and such. Kind of another terrible happening. And remember a man named Malamotis that worked with the Emmy's office. Again, he had been there for 3 years, and he was interviewed by reporters as saying how peaceful the scene was. Well, he was put on administrative leave because he was found to be releasing pictures of the decomposed bodies to people and to reporters. So he wasn't just talking to reporters, he was releasing actual photos. So this was another, horrendous thing that was happening. Now, I am going to get into the actual people. These people are important. They have, names and families and everything like that. So the first of the 39 is Yvonne McCurdy Hill. So she is 38 years old. She was originally from Ohio. Her member name was Devotee. She had been a postal supervisor in Cincinnati and a computer buff. So she was really into computers. She was one of the ones that could train and work, and the others in the group. Now, she had abandoned her newborn twins, and she had several other children, like several sons, at the time that she joined the group. Now, Denise June Thurman, she was 44 years old. She was originally, it said, from Austin, Texas. Her member name is Gwynoti, Gwyn, Gwynoti. She had been a cheerleader. She had then turned to drugs, and kind of to get away from drugs, she had turned away or to the New Age Christian Science and Eastern philosophies. Like she was just seeking. She does go on to go to Boston University. She was a very intelligent woman. She was very strong in the group. She is the one that wrote The Undercover Jesus. And like we talked about, she was one of the main students with Sawyer. She was called June, which is her middle name, for the satellite program. So she was very integral in the group and had been in the group for, a long time. Now, a third person is LaDonna Ann Brigado. LaDonna was a violinist. She was a computer programmer. She was 40 years old at this time. She was from Colorado. Her name was Galoti. Her family had said she was very vulnerable at the time when she joined the group. They believed that, this was definitely a cult, and they said she was brainwashed. And they had actually had a private investigator trying to find her, and this private investigator had tracked her down to a mailbox in La Jolla, California. And this was a week before the suicides happened, and her family was absolutely devastated because they had been searching for her and trying to get to her. Fourth is a Margaret June Bull. She goes by Peggy. Her member name was Sinodi, and she was 53, originally from Washington or New Mexico. She had an English degree from the University of Washington. She had taught in Spain. She had continually called her family a couple times over the years while she was in the group, and she had actually gone home to visit the family in Thanksgiving. It was the Thanksgiving break in 93, so that was the last time her family had seen her. And she had joined the group in 75, 76. That first entry. Now, an Erica Ernest, she was 39. She went by Chakotay. So she had been with a member, like whenever she entered in the 75, 76 range, she was with a Frank Lyford. Now, Frank, he left the group in like 90, and they were basically a couple. In fact, in the newspapers at the time that they kind of went into the group, they were from Calgary. It said, quote unquote, perfect couple from Calgary is, now with the cult. So this was like in the newspaper. Her family had not heard from her this whole time. And they did say that they felt like she was brainwashed, and they did have her body shipped back to Canada. Now, again, I told you that Frank, just like Sawyer, is integral in the documentary. Again, he says that he leaves in the early 90s. He does discuss that the group, over the years, that going to Tijuana and even going to Las Vegas was something that the group did. So, because the group had gone to Las Vegas before they exited, they had spent about 1900 or so gambling and about 3500 riding this ride called the Big Shot roller coaster. Yeah. So Frank mentioned that they liked to gamble and that they had been to Las Vegas. They had even discussed moving there, but he also discussed that over the years they would take trips, they would go to museums, they had been to Catalina Island, like very interesting, like doing very quote unquote human things, right? So it's just so interesting. But Frank was very devastated when, because he had tried to get Erica to leave the group when he left the group and she wouldn't. So he was devastated with all of this going on. And he does not, I will say, Frank, like Sawyer seems to still be indoctrined into, Frank doesn't. I will say, Frank, I think Frank was like, no. I mean, not to say he was completely, I don't know, but yeah, he doesn't seem to be indoctrined. Now, there's a Gail Renee Mater. She was 28. She was from Sag Harbor, New York. Her name was Yursodi. She had actually dropped out of college and moved to California with a boyfriend around 94. And her and the boyfriend, they started their business, and then both the relationship and business failed. So then she was just in a very hard place. Her mom said she had joined the group because of her fear of death, and that the group promised that she would never die. And her mom stated that they mind controlled her. Now, there's a Stephen Terry McCarter. So his name is Soroti. He was very integral. Not a whole lot known about him. I guess he did not have a lot of family, but he was 41. It said that he was from New Mexico or registered, identification in New Mexico. He was the extremely gung ho one. He was castrated. It is said in some interviews that it was his idea for the group. And I will say in his exit, he's like, I mean, he's smiling, he's ready, he's just ready to roll as far as exiting. So he was, they talk about how enthusiastic he was always, and that they actually had to like kind of try to calm him down. And I believe he went by Terry, but his name in the group was Soroti. Now there's a David Jeffrey Moore. He's 41, from California. His name is Alex Odie. He joined in 75. David's family said he was a very angry and emotional teenager. He was very good with fixing vehicles. And the coroner, when he talked to his family, like, he just told them that it looked like he died with hope. And I thought that was so sad. And just so, I mean, this really affected like these investigators, like, there were tears, these people that are working these scenes. This was just a very hard death, so much death. There was a Thomas Alvin Nichols. He was 59. His name was Distody. Now, he was the brother to a Nichelle Nichols, and she was an actress on Star Trek. And afterwards, she is interviewed by Larry King, and she just discusses how Thomas was extremely intelligent and that he died with great dignity. She respected him and his decision. And they had spoken last in 1994, so it had been 3 years since she had heard from her brother. Now, Susan Elizabeth Nora Pop. So she was 54. Her name was Narodi. She really loved UFOs. Like, she loved everything about that. She believed in aliens. She was one of the ones that signed a lease, like, evidently in her name in September of 95 for a property in New Mexico for the group. And she was paying rent of $3,400 for them. So she was one of the ones in New Mexico, by the way. Now, Margaret Ella Richter, she was 46. Her name was Melody. She had been valedictorian of her high school in Las Palomas in 69. She then went on to attend UC Berkeley. She graduates with majors in computer science, math, and German. I mean, yeah. She had a master's at UCLA. She had joined the group after she had a 3-year marriage fail. And over the 22 years she was in the group, she was sent back a lot of recruitment videos and visited her family twice during that period. But she was basically trying to recruit her family. Now, Joel Peter McCormick, he's 29. His name is Abinodi. He was from Wisconsin. He joined when the name of the group, which for a long time was called the Total Overcomers, but he joined them. And then he also came in the period of 94. So he joined in 94. He was only 29. And he was in that recruitment time period. Remember when they were trying to get followers. Now, Nancy Diane Nelson, she's 45. She was known as Vic Nodi, and she was described as a nun, and not a lot else was mentioned about her. A Norma Jean Nelson, I don't know if these women were related, kind of seems like it, but she was 59. She went by Bernodi. She believes she was from the Star Trek, the show, so she believed that that's where she was from. Dana Tracy Abrio, she was 35. Her name was Irv Modi. She had a brother in the group. Now, his name is Gary St. Louis, and it looked like there was a couple of them, like a half brother. A Judith Ann Lawson Rolland. She was 59. She was with Jody, like WJD, with Jody. Authorities thought Judith may have actually gone with the final two ladies. So she had a lot less decomposition. So she was evidently in that last 7 group before Susan and them. So yes, and Julie. Now, Michael Barr Sando, he's 26. He's known as Vernodi. He had been in the Army. He had been his senior class president. He also, it looks like he was related to the Dana Abreu and Gary St. Louis. There is a Brian Allen Schaaf, not a lot known about him, but he was 40 years old, and he went by Dorody. Now, a Joyce Angela Scala, she's 58. She's from New Mexico, and she went by when it's Singodi. That Gary Jordan St. Louis that we mentioned that was related to Dana and Michael. So he had joined back in 92, and he was known as Stelodi, kind of from, it looks like St. Louis. And he was 44. Now, there's a Robert John Arancio. He's 46. He went by Jim Modi. So he handled recruitment for the group. He and a woman named Cheryl, they had business permits in their name for the Total Overcomers. He would send out videos. He was just instrumental in recruitment for the group. Now, there's a Raymond Allen Bowers, and we kind of talked about him before, but he's 45. He went by Todoti. He was depressed and lost when he met the group in 75. He had lost his brother to a freak boating accident. He had gone through a divorce. And he just never got over these things, according to his family, which is why they felt like he joined the group and stayed with the group. There's a Cheryl Elaine Butcher. We just mentioned that she was instrumental with working with um, Jamodi as far as recruitment. She's 43. She went by Aunt Toady. She had been last at home in 1991. Her family described her as a very intelligent and happy child. She played piano, and she had been with the group since 76. There's a Michael Howard Carrier. He was from Texas. He was 48, and he went by Tolodi. There's Suzanne Sylvia Cook. She's 54. She went by Silvodi. Now, her husband Nick, we'll kind of talk about him. He and her had been in the group on and off for years, like since the 70s. She has a daughter named Kelly. Kelly was very big in the documentary. Just very sad. They had basically, her and Nick had left Kelly, because they had to leave everybody. And so they kind of went through periods where they would leave the group, but Nick does leave the group, and Susanna had stayed. So that was very hard for her daughter. Now, and we'll kind of get into Nick because there's more there. Now, John M. Craig, he goes by Mickey. His name is Lagodi. He was a father. He was tall, rugged, handsome. So he is said to be the quote unquote, aka Logan Lawson, or brother Logan. So second in command to Herff. He was 63 years old. He had joined the group in 75, and he had a lot of business acumen. He was very smart. As you can see, a lot of these people are very, very intelligent, very educated individuals. But he had a lot of background, and he was very helpful. So he became second in command to Herff after Bonnie passes away. There's a Lawrence Jackson Gale. He's 47, and he went by Glenody. A Darwin Lee Johnson, 42. He went by Leody. He played in a band called the Dharma Kabata. He believed in aliens, and all of the songs were about that. So he was very into like UFO and aliens as well. There's a David Cabot Van Sinderen. So we've mentioned him. He was the one with the trust fund. He was a longtime member, and he was 49, and his name was Elodie. There's Jackie Opal Leonard. She's 72. Her name was Persody. She had joined in 75. She had had grown kids at that time and grandkids, but she was always, like her family said, a restless person searching for meaning. There's a Betty Eldrin Deal. She's 64. She goes by Samodi. In March of 95, she rented a mailbox, and the office is in the hardware store in New Mexico. So she was one of the ones that were living in New Mexico during that time we discussed. There was a man that knew them when their time in New Mexico, and he said that when they were called to go to California, they did not want to go. Now there's a Jeffrey Howard Lewis. He's 41. He went by Tersodi. He was a massage therapist that joined in 93, and he actually joined for the second time. There's Alfonso Richard Foster. He's 44. He goes by Custodi. We mentioned him and his sisters before, how they found out, and he had been in the group really early and didn't connect with his family ever, so they had not seen him or heard from him in a long time. There's a Lindley Earhard Peace. He was 41. He went by Demoti. His parents had passed on, so he didn't have any relatives around. There's a Lucy Ava Pasha. She was 63, and she went by Stradoti. There's a Gordon Thomas Welch. He was 50 and went by Stimoti. There is a Susan Strom. So again, she had the nursing background. She was one of, the last two to go. She was 44, and she went by Jinjodi. There's Julie LaMontague. She was 45. She went by Lavrodi, and she was also a nurse. Her family stated that she had fallen apart after the death of her father, who was like her knight in shining armor, and her brother would blame her for her passing, stating about her, "Look at the guy. He looks like a lunatic. He is a monster." Now, the last is Herff Applewhite, and investigators would find evidence that in a meeting in March, Herff had told the group he was dying of liver cancer. So in his autopsy, they made sure to look for any signs of cancer, and he had 0 cancer in his body. All that reflected in his body was just normal coronary artery disease for a man his age, which at this time I believe he was in his 60s. He was 67 or so. Now, in the aftermath, there other ex-members, they come forward, and others are actually looking to exit with the group. Like, they're upset that the group has gone. And you do have, remember, you had Suzanne, she was married to Nick. Nick is one of them. And so we'll kind of discuss that, because him and another ex-member, a Chuck Humphrey, they do try to exit, but they kind of rent a hotel room. They do the same concoction as the group. And this is like, I believe, in April or so. And Chuck lives. So he is survived and found, but Nick does pass away. And so Kelly loses both of her parents to this group decision. Just like Chuck Humphrey and also Wayne Cook, Wayne Bean, Wayne's actions just being have gone through. There were multiple past members that felt like they had missed the mark. And there were many members, there was a lot of worry just across the nation and everywhere that there would be more suicides. And even in August, so there was the survivors put together like an away team and an actual event, a public meeting on a Sunday in August at the University of Berkeley. And they were going to show a 70-minute videotape of Herff, talking about the whole spill, the whole how to get to the next level and everything. And so there were just a lot of people, raised eyebrows and worried that there would be more people involved. Chuck Humphrey, he also would get involved in lawsuits. So you had the quote unquote intellectual property of Heaven's Gate. So there is a TILA services set up, and that stands for the evolutionary level above human. Now, this is to this day the owner of the intellectual properties of like the website. They actually keep the website up. You can go to the website and look at it. That was the source of a lot of my information. And you can email, you can actually request hard copies of videotapes and their book and everything. Like, it's very interesting. So the TILA services is actually owned by a Mark and Sarah King. So Mark and I guess Sarah as well, I'm not really sure. He was an ex-member of the group, and he had left the group. And after all this happened, like, he actually filed lawsuit against Chuck Humphrey because Chuck was utilizing the Heaven's Gate name as his own. So there were multiple lawsuits actually filed by the Kings against different things. And the Kings even filed a lawsuit against the San Diego County because, the county collected all of the items of the group. We're talking, all the assets that were left behind, items auctioned and everything. They collected it. So they had to do they spent a lot of money, the county did, in taking care of these bodies and everything else. So I don't know the outcome, if they settled or whatever, but it looks like the Kings had filed suit against San Diego, against Humphreys, and then some other people that were trying to use the intellectual properties. But again, you can email, and I did. So I'm going to tell you what I emailed just to kind of give you guys an idea there. So I sent my email on March 31st, and I just said, hello, I'm working on an upcoming episode of Heaven's Gate about, the background of T and Doe, and I just have some questions. Any response would be greatly appreciated. So I asked the question, is the group active currently? How many members are in the group? And if a group is active, is there a leader? So they responded back. They didn't say who it was. I'm guessing that this was Mark or Sarah King, but they came back and said, no, the group came to an end in 97. There are no members. To answer the Question 2, 0, the group ended 29 years ago. And then 3, no leader, the group is over now. So that was the response. They did respond pretty much that same day. So that was really interesting. But basically, it's not an ongoing group, but the teachings, obviously, I don't know where Mark and Sarah stand as far as their own thoughts, but, they want to keep this Tila services and the website alive, and that's what they're doing. Okay. So I do find that interesting. Now, when all this happened, of course, a lot of the bodies were being sent, they had to pay for the expense of this, the families did. And so some of the bodies were going to be cremated by the county. And so that was like the San Diego County kind of wanted the funds or wanted whatever was collected from the estate to settle all of these, costs for the county. Now, her sister Louise, she had come forward. She had been watching the TV, like no one reached out to her when this happened, but she reached out to San Diego and allegedly she was going to have, at least at the time, she said that she wanted Herff's body shipped to Texas because she was going to bury Herff by their father. That was what she had mentioned. Now, according to Find a Grave, Herff was actually cremated. So I don't know if she maybe found out the cost and couldn't pay for his body to be shipped to her and such, but according to what I'm seeing, it says that he is cremated. Now, his father, he is buried in San Antonio. It's the Mission Burial Park South in San Antonio, Texas. So if anyone, just FYI, if you are in San Antonio and can tell me if Herff Jr. is beside Herff Sr., that would be like really interesting. And it does look like, and according to what I'm seeing, Louise actually passed away herself in 2013. So, this was 97 when she had made those comments, but she did pass away in 2013. So she's no longer living. Now, at the time, Herff did have 2 children. He did have a son. His name was Mark Applewhite. He was 40 years old at the time of 97. And it said that he was a born again Christian and that he hadn't seen his dad, since he was 5. Like, literally hadn't talked to him, seen him, or anything. Um, and he did a few interviews and he stated that he, quote unquote, had the real ticket to heaven, like he is in Mark. And he just explained that he was very saddened at the what happened and that his father was involved in all of these deaths and how sad it was. So that was his stance on that. Pretty much he remains anonymous for the most part, but it's just absolutely sad to me that Herff walked away when his oldest child was 5. And so his youngest was probably like 2 or 3. And I believe it was a girl. So it's just absolutely sad. The biggest thing that after all of this had come out, there was Time Magazine, everything was everywhere. They were talking about this. It's a huge matter. Saturday Night Live was making fun. Larry King had on survivors and different things. And there was an ex-member, and I didn't talk about him a whole lot. He was an ex-member, but he was in the group for a long time, and evidently Herff had feelings for this man, but his name is Dick Jocelyn. And after all this happened, Dick would do interviews and different things, and he had like a very hard time with not making it to the next level. Like he was very much still indoctrined in 1997, even though he had left the group in 1990. He did not commit suicide like Wayne Cook or Chuck Humphreys tried to. He would eventually pass, I think, or like 2003 or so. But, a lot of these ex members, just because it was over, quote unquote, it still was with them. And, you can go on YouTube and watch everything that is posted by Sawyer, and he has, tons of videos, and it's, again, really tough to know if like how he feels about things. Obviously he didn't want to be castrated. He left the group on his own accord in 94, and obviously he hasn't participated in any type of next level leaving himself. But it seems like he definitely believes the teachings, or at least he enjoys maybe just discussing what he went through. But it is very interesting. You can watch, again, everything. And I will have links so that you can watch exits. You can watch the 12 series. Oh my goodness. I mean, it is mind numbing. And I'll just be honest, it is absolutely mind numbing to listen to. I hate to say it, it was this reporter. A lot of people were being really mean after all this happened. And one reporter says, basically, these people killed themselves because they didn't want to hear Herff anymore. Like, he was just awful. He just went around and round and round. And after listening to him for so many years, they were like, I'm done. But obviously, that is not the truth. But that was basically how a lot of people felt about the whole thing. And just to kind of give you some ideas there. One reporter, this was a Dwayne Wickham, he wrote this like right after the happenings in March of 97. He says, the truth of the matter is, they were deceived. They were hoodwinked, bamboozled by a deranged religious shyster. They were led astray by their search for the ultimate knowledge. They took their lives at the behest of Marshall Applegate, but they fell victim to their own escape from reality, a twisted, warped vision of life and death that is the common definition of quote unquote nuts. Now, this was rampant as far as everything that I had found, as far as people's feelings. And that's where I'm gonna kind of leave this, guys. Like, this is a whole lot. This was a lot to me. I will post, it's still just incredibly interesting. And I think the interesting part is like living the way they did, dying the way they did. They were completely devoted. And whether you I know it was like Nichelle Nichols for her brother Thomas, it was like, I respect him. He's an adult. He's an intelligent adult. Well, I can see a sister saying that and just wanting to respect her brother and his wishes. But I have to tell you, as a mommy and as a mom, and I have like, and of course, I've covered now. This is like the third cult for me to cover. We have the Cobbites and then the Tony Alamo cult. And there's so many out there that we've watched, documentaries on. But I've always told Elle, I'm like, Elle, if you get involved with people that ask for you to not talk to your loved ones, and then they ask for you to give them all their money, like, run. Like, those two things, that's what cults do. And whether we want to say this is a group or a cult or religion or whatever we think this is, like, I've always, as a mommy, and I would say if my daughter ever participated in anything like this, I would have done what all those other parents would have. Even if she was adult, I would have hired a private investigator. I would have found her. I would have gone to the end of the world to find her and just make sure she's okay. Again, yeah, it's just interesting. So the questions are, do you think Herff was a psychological con man? Was he like a Jim Jones, a Charlie Manson, a David Koresh? Is he just a religious leader? Do you think that he believed even what he was teaching? Because I have a tough time with that, looking at the things that they did, especially at the end, and all of the quote unquote human things that they did. I personally, just my personal feeling was that Herff was a Christian man, grew up in a Christian household. He had Christian values, and he had a really tough time with his own sexuality, I guess, at the time, and didn't understand it. And so he was like, I don't want to be anyway. Like, I don't want to have any type of sex. I want to be like just sexless. I just want to take that away. And because that was kind of the bottom line that they really stuck to, because clearly they kind of enjoyed having fun. They kind of enjoyed gambling. They kind of, they ran around the country, definitely not living by certain laws. But then on the flip side, they were so neat and so tidy and did a lot of good things and polite and just, I don't know. So I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on this, because this is such an interesting and complicated case. And of course, I think people are complicated. Do you think that he was mentally ill and that was really the feeling of his family? So that is a question. Let me know. This is a lot, guys. I haven't come at you with an episode in a minute, but you've got a lot to listen to, and I hope you like it. And I will be putting out a lot of new content soon. So stay tuned for all the content. Again, Slenderman is coming. I have some cases out of Kentucky. I have a lot of requested different things, and then I have something really interesting planned. I I don't know. I'll clue you in there later on that, but there's just a lot planned. So stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Bye. A little PS to this. I noticed I forgot to mention this in the edit. So, this whole situation, the mass suicide, it falls under acts of terrorism on domestic territory, and it is a terroristic violent crime. So this whole situation was investigated deeply by the actual FBI under that act, which was in place when this happened in 1997. Another thing that I did want to mention, and of course they found that it was all Herff related, nobody else outside of the group was involved, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention was about the house. So the house was located, like I mentioned, at Colina Norte. So right after this all happened, the house was for sale the whole time, but they were trying to sell it. There was a lot of interest. A lot of people in other countries even wanted it. I don't know what happened or if it had to do with Sam's situation with the government and his tax evasion. I'm pretty sure that's probably what happened. The government took back all his assets. He couldn't sell it. But the house ultimately ends up being sold for like only $698,000, about half as much as what it was said to be worth at the time that before this happened. And they did end up, the investors that purchased it, they tore down the house, and even before that happened, I believe the neighborhood wanted the stigma gone, and so they actually changed the name of the street. So the street is actually called Paseo Victoria. So just FYI, these were just a few tidbits that I wanted to share with you guys. Bye.